Dr. Fauci spoke at an event in Seattle this week where he joked with the masked-up crowd about creating COVID through gain of function in his kitchen.
We're at the epicenter of the initial outbreak. WA1, Washington 1, is considered the ancestral model strain.
I developed the ancestral model strain. I created it.
That's right. You let it loose.
I was in my kitchen.
You let it loose. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Gain of function. Here we come. You're making aranja, Italian meatballs, and that's a gain of function. All right.
I mean, whatever. I guess I don't mind joking about very controversial subjects. This could be one of those jokes that grain of truth in the joke, perhaps. I mean, this is what we're arguing about. This is what we're trying to get to the bottom of. Well, Did research? No, nobody thinks Fauci grew COVID or anything else.
A little marinara. A little RNA.
I was getting hungry listening to this. Italian, this could be the one thing I like about Dr. Fauci would be if he's a good Italian cook.
The COVID blown up does look a little like a spicy meatball.
We are getting hungry. This is our last segment of the day. Lunchtime is approaching. But, you know, the concern is that Fauci is this advocate of research that could have made a disease like COVID more transmissible, more contagious, and more deadly. And he's defended on the show the idea of doing this research. He said that this research absolutely could not have created COVID. This was, an outbreak in that came from animals, and this is what we've discussed a million times. But the concern that we have is that we're not being careful enough about this research. It's being funded. It's not being tracked, etc. So to hear him joke about it, I don't know. It's probably fine to joke about it, but.
So look, definitely the point is that he's joking about it because the claim that he is so closely connected to it that he would literally be doing it, I think he's reflecting that there's an overstatement and a kind of
well, you're right,
hyperbole.
and by going to that, by making it sound like that's what we're saying is that he literally did it. Yet then we can all say, oh, how ridiculous, because that is ridiculous, because that's not what's being alleged.
He's defended gain-of-function research, and I think that this is another one of those things I would defer to people who are in the know. Is the issue with gain-of-function research, or is the issue that this research was being done with equipment that was nowhere close to the level of kind of lab protection that was necessary for how dangerous it was, that it was being done very close to highly populated civilian areas, wet markets and the like, where it had a high possibility of spreading. You could have, there are differently graded labs in terms of how much protective gear people are forced to make, how much kind of quarantine space there is, what the procedures are in terms of preventing spread. Obviously, there's all kinds of research that happens in the Arctic or Antarctic, so that's far away from human beings and animals and able to spread at all. That's where they keep the last smallpox virus and a lot of these things that we don't want to get out. So there are obviously different levels of protection that can be done. And so that being the case, am I necessarily against gain-of-function research as a whole? I'm not sure. There are obviously medical reasons why people do it to try to improve our world and be able to head off diseases like this at the pass. However, I do think you're right that it feels like a somewhat bad faith dodge for him to go to the idea that he is personally being accused of doing this as opposed to covering up culpability for those who were doing it.
And that's actually a question I have, and a question I've never had answered, including by Dr. Fauci when he was on the show and I asked him this directly. What is the benefit of doing the research? What medical insight or innovations do we gain from doing this kind of research? Because the kinds of therapeutics and vaccines we have for COVID have nothing to do with that kind of research. So I have not heard anyone conclusively state, look, here are the risks, but we've decided that these advantages outweigh the risks. What are these advantages? Well, I've never heard them articulated.
I thought from doing an interview about this about a year ago with Thomas Frank that the argument was that it helps you to go ahead and develop vaccines for diseases like COVID that have not yet emerged.
Our vaccines do not at all derive from that research.
Well, but is that always the case? Does this particular vaccine not happen to have been related to gain-of-function research, or is it always the case that gain-of-function research is not? I mean, it seems it would be odd if there were no medically indicated reason to pursue this.
Right, that's my
research.
concern. It's just a bunch of scientists, doing kind of. You didn't stop to think about. You only did it because you could. You didn't stop to think about what you did it because you should have. Like, there's no. It's just kind of research or experimentation for experimentation's sake.
Well, it's about studying how these viruses behave, how transmissible they are, those kinds of things. To model it out before it actually occurs in the.
Knowledge
in
for
the
knowledge's
wild.
sake, I guess, is fine. But if you carry even a small risk of the extinction of humanity.
So this is from the National Library of Medicine, National Institute for Biotechnology Information. It says that gain-of-function research involves, we know what it is. Such research, when conducted by responsible scientists, usually aims to improve understanding of disease-causing agents, their interaction with human hosts, and or their potential to cause pandemics. The ultimate objective of such research is to better inform public health and preparedness efforts and or development of medical countermeasures.
Right, but that's pretty nonspecific.
Well, it's trying to develop diseases beforehand and to
Trying
understand.
to.
So, for example, I don't know if what you're saying.
I'm saying put the pharmaceutical on the table that we invented this because we made this virus more powerful.
Well, au contraire, look at something like, the vaccine that was ultimately developed for COVID was able to be developed so quickly in part because it relied on previous vaccines for other similar kinds of SARS variants. The monkeypox vaccine that people are having difficulty rolling out and getting to folks. Folks are saying that you can also use the smallpox vaccine in lieu of it, although it is not good for immunocompromised patients, so they prefer not to, but there is some overlapping functionality there. So I do think the idea is that these are building blocks, and having a better understanding of the vaccine might be helpful. Now, this article goes on to question the ethics of it, given the cost-benefits analysis of it. If the risks are so high, and to your point, the gain,
I'm not saying we should not study viruses. Of course, we should study viruses. It's do we have to manipulate them in such a way where they pose a greater threat to us to better understand how they infect people? Do you see how that's? Well, they were able to infect people originally. We're talking about research that actually makes them more contagious. Again,
so
maybe
I think for this reason, Barack Obama put a pause on this kind of research and funding back in 2014. And so obviously there's an ongoing conversation about that.
Wasn't that the thing Obama was most afraid of when he was departing his presidency, was that holy crap, a pandemic, epidemic we're just not prepared for it and it would be catastrophic?
And there has been, I'm sorry to say, some there's been defunding of the kind of stockpiles that we had. That's part of why we don't have a lot of the monkeypox vaccine. We used to have scores and scores of it, and we just let it expire. There is a way that I'm sorry, sometimes you got to spend money to protect the community for an eventuality that may or may not happen. May or may not happen. And you can sit there and say that's government waste and it wasn't a good use of time.
This seems like a better use of government funds than a lot of things we're spending money on right now.
I certainly can agree. I can certainly agree with you on that, Robby.
All right, tomorrow on Rising, we pass the baton over to Ryan Grimm and Emily Jashinsky. They'll be taking a deep dive into the FBI's politicization of the last several decades with reporter Lee Fang.
Oh, that sounds good. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. For those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
And we'll see you next week, back here, same time, same place.
Bye-bye.